Good afternoon. You're welcome again to another edition of Searching the Heart. I'm going to continue from where I stopped last week on this version of Searching the Heart. I was able to talk about the enticements of political power. And today I want to add a little on that and ask a question. Why do politicians withhold funding from critical sectors? It's a question that many people who are enthusiastic about government, about policy development, and of course generally about the welfare of human beings always ask. This is a question they always ask. Especially in developing countries. These things happen in all countries. Yet in developing countries, we find that somehow these questions pop up very frequently. It is assumed that leadership will always target the most important sectors, put money there, so that these sectors will develop. But it's not always like that. Now, there may be various reasons. Sometimes the lack of resources is an issue. Sometimes there are other issues that might be legitimate. Yet, most of the time, like we talked about last episode, that sometimes realities don't match expectations. The dichotomy between needs and wants, of course, there's need for budgeting and planning in that regard. And in the church, because I'm a church person, the church environment, there is, in the past few centuries, there's this upsurge of belief that when resources are demanded, resources should be provided. And yet in the same church, there's that encouragement that people should be patient. And it takes a good leader to know the balance between this thing. And often, what happens is that there's always, complain that there's too much theory or theorizing without really understanding the practicality of what it takes. And that is the problem in the church, and has led to a lot of uproar and gradual gravitation away from the church. Well, some people prefer that you just encourage them and you make them feel happy, while others, they may not make any statements. If you don't show them how to solve their problems, they will just gravitate away from the church. And there seems to me, in my view, that dichotomy between those who are comfortable and those who are not. And those who are comfortable prefer to have happy messages from the pulpit. Of course, they don't want to interfere in how they make their money, and of course, how to manage that money and all that, because they are already comfortable. But others that are not want you to solve their problem. And if you do not solve their problems, they just gravitate, quietly from the church. And that is it. So we must understand this, even especially in media cycles, as we try to push the clergy away from talking about real issues and talking about just happy messages, which is very rampant these days. Yes, let's look at a few issues. Human welfare is so important. That's why we're considering this topic today. Why do politicians withhold funding from critical sectors? In the story of Nigeria, and of course I am one that has, because I grew up in Nigeria, presently in Nigeria, I'm very conversant with this. And most of the complaints as we were growing up was really about the speed of development. Of course, the colonial experience had brought a lot of things into the country, technology, education, and all whatnot. And the desire of so many of the educated was that whatever proceeds or benefits from this education that came to the fore would be harnessed and used by the government, especially when Nigerian graduates discovered innovation. It was expected that the government would fund these graduates, in the best universities, whether within or outside the country, and also put money into the development of these research. But that was not always the case. Okay, it was not always the case. There were situations where notable inventions were sneaked out of the country because they were suppressed, okay, within the country. And of course, this was because of the general preponderance of a lack of funding for research and development. Not really because they were targeting a particular person, I believe, in my view, but because there was a general nonchalance or inability to fund such research. Okay, and this was the problem, whether through mismanagement of resources or the absence of such resources. It's difficult to say, but this was a very rampant issue. Okay, so as we grew up, and it's still an issue today. Okay, still an issue up to today. And we would today look at some of the reasons why, okay, these things happen. And number one of those reasons is that the human nature is not purely benevolent. Okay, it's not purely benevolent. This is the problem. Okay, of course, we know very well that conflicts arise in human society because of this. Okay, because human beings, while the secular humanist perspective believes that human beings are actually benevolent beings, it has been proven over the millennia that it is not so. Human beings tend to fight one another, to destroy one another, even though we are partly made as good beings, benevolent beings. We are able to find it in our hearts to love one another, to care for one another. And that is what it means actually to be human as opposed to be an animal. Okay? But there is still that part of us that is not very benevolent. And because of that, of course you would that's one explanation for the reason why somebody would be, like we talked about in the previous episode, talking about politics, would go into a place of government and not fulfill his promises, blatantly refuse to fulfill his promises. That is one reason. Okay, human nature is not purely benevolent. It's selfish, it's greedy, and is sometimes looks for conflict. Okay, just for the sake of conflict, and this is the issue. Number two reason is that some critical sectors are not real sectors. Okay, some critical sectors are not real sectors, and real sectors are known to be the more productive sectors. The land, housing, infrastructural development, power, and all whatnot. These are the sectors that directly affect the economy. Okay, and because of this, there is more emphasis on these sectors, and of course, resources are put in there. But sometimes there are critical sectors that are not real sectors. In terms of course, we know one of those is the mental health of the people. Okay, and this is where faith and religion comes. Okay, mental health has to do with, of course, in the scientific point of view, psychology, psychiatry, all that. But of course, we know that a lot of people depend a lot on faith and religion as a critical part of their lives. And unfortunately, the age when this sector was considered a critical sector has passed. Okay, we live in the age of science now. Modern age is the age of science. It's this age of reason, and of course, these sectors are not always considered. Of course, religion was sidelined in favor of psychology, and even psychology is not really at the forefront of the pursuit of any government per se, and so it's not considered a critical sector. Okay, we'll look at more of this after this show.
Discover a transformative journey into the kingdom of heaven. Following the initial publication, the author dives deeper with two insightful follow-up books. Ever felt disconnected from God even in worship? Explore how God's unconventional ways can transform your life. How can you align with divine plans, avoiding distractions? Find answers in The Kingdom of Heaven on Earth and The 3, Illuminating Christian Truths and Prophetic Practices. Unlock profound insights guiding you toward a deeper connection with God. Don't miss out. Dive into this enlightening exploration today. Click the link on the caption to get your copy.
What is considered a critical sector is what we are now looking at. Okay, the emotional well-being of the people. It is critical for the smooth running of government. The social well-being of the people is critical for the smooth running of government. I remember just about a week ago, I was talking about this, and I was able to quote from a scripture in the Bible how a prophet died because he was deceived by an older prophet to submit to a social paradigm. Okay, just a friendly visit to the prophet's house, and that is what cost the prophet his life. That is a very interesting biblical story. So to show you the importance of social issues that could cause a prophet to lose his life, because he was instructed by God himself not to visit any person's house, to eat in any person's house. So a social issue caused the death of a prophet. So this is the issue. These issues are critical sectors, but not always accepted as such. And we put a lot of money in the more real sectors, and we neglect such other critical sectors. And some of those critical sectors have to do with spiritual issues. Now, the modern society does not really value the spiritual nature of humanity. It might value a little the social, psychosocial nature of the human society, but it may not really, because there is no, according to some scholars, there is no proof for the presence of the spirit, soul, and body. Okay, there might be proof of the soul, there might be proof for the body, but there's no proof for the spirit. Okay, scholarly proof for the spirit, and because of that, the spirit is neglected as part of the human makeup, and because of this, is not considered as critical to human survival, and this is the problem. So, critical sectors not considered as real sectors. And you know that politicians, of course, we have already mentioned, prefer to put money in the real sector, because that is what people will see, that is what people appreciate. It fills their stomach: agriculture, roads, housing, okay, healthcare, physical healthcare. So these are transportation, are the sectors that the politicians might want to put resources in, which is okay and which is good. But there are critical sectors that are not really real sectors. Okay. Now the third point, we'll come back to that, but I'll go straight to the third point, which is real sectors that are labor intensive and often controversial. Now this is an issue. Of course, we have said that real sectors are the sectors that politicians or government want to put their money into. Okay, which is okay, and it is the popular thing. But strangely enough, it is not always so. Like a sector like in agriculture, for instance, especially in the modern era, because of the preponderance of machines and improved agricultural methods. Those with more resources tend to be able to produce more food. And in areas where it is labor intensive, because of the absence of the machines that are needed to till and to develop the land and the chemicals and the know-how, you discover that it is labor intensive. And because of this, of course, government would not tend to put the money there. They would prefer to put money in the oil sector, for instance, yes, in the power sector, for instance, because by putting money there, you will be indirectly putting money in the hands of those who have the know-how, who have the machines to go into the agriculture and then produce the food. And of course, the poor farmer in the village will be disenfranchised in that. So this is what actually happens, okay? It is not ideal, but it happens, okay? Partly because, of course, the issues, corruption, because of marginalization, because so many reasons, okay? People, these sectors, even though they are real sectors, are ignored. And these creates some of these problems. So we're still looking, remember, we're still looking at why politicians withhold funding from critical sectors. So this is a very important point that we must know. If we are really deceived that even in the real sectors, government will put money there in sufficient quantity, it does not always happen because of course, the what convenience? What do you call it? You want to call it convenience? They want the quickest results, and of course, the quickest result might not always come from certain sectors, even though they are real sectors. Okay. Number 4. Human value as greater than labor. Okay, than mere labor. Now, this I want to look at this briefly, in line with the fact that critical sectors may not always be the real sector. Okay, we find that human value is not always in mere labor. Okay, and this is a part of the spiritual factors that affect human civilization that are not always identified through science. Okay, that human value may be greater than mere labor, the mere presence or the mere output of labor. Yes, and this is something that is beginning to show itself in this generation. Now, this is a very strange phenomenon, and which has come to light even more with the upsurge in the practice of necromancy. Okay, and of course, I believe for one that the practice of necromancy has become very rampant because of the conflicts that have come because of discovery of the value of a human being greater than just mere his ability to output any labor, any productive labor. Okay, and this leads us, we now combine this with this point that is from the denial of the nebulous value of the human being. Okay, the value of a human being is not always very clear, it is nebulous. Okay, and the discovery of this creates the reaction, because people who are involved in religion, in faith practices, and in necromancy are those who normally bring this to the fore, because they usually react whether negatively or positively towards particular people. And those who are observing want to ask the question why. Okay, they want to know. Most of the time they think that it is because these people are producing something of value, okay, like food, money, or anything of value, and they look around, they don't see it, and they begin to ask. Okay, what is it that this person has? This person must have some secret riches somewhere. But evidently, most of the time, it's not so. And that is what is leading to a lot of the crises and the proliferation of religion. Okay, that is why one of the reasons religion has subsisted, because it has been clearly discovered that human beings have a spiritual essence. And this spiritual essence creates an attraction towards them, creates, sometimes discoveries. Okay, discoveries are birthed because of the spiritual nature of some of these human beings, spiritual strength, as it were, of some of these human beings, and they attract people around them. And sometimes it comes like miracles, of course, the popular one, but not always. And this is what, if miracles are very obvious, and so people would tend to, appreciate that and begin to, argue back and forth on the genuineness or not of those miracles. But when the situation is like there is no obvious miracle, and yet there is a gravitation around a certain person or group of people, it becomes obvious that there is a nebulous value, and this nebulous value creates a kind of crisis around such people. One of the important people around the world who have attracted a lot of crises around themselves is, of course, the Jews. And why have the Jews been able to attract this crisis? Because the Bible comes from them. And the Bible has authored 3 major religions of the world. Okay? Now, this is a real thing, but it is nebulous. It is very nebulous. You can't, go and get money from the Bible. You can't hold the Bible up and, just harvest money from it. Okay? It is an idea. It creates ideas. It fuels the social life of people. It fuels the moral life of people. And it helps with psychological development of people. And so the value is nebulous, but it has value nonetheless. And this is one of the examples of this kind of value, nebulous value, that is often denied. And because it is denied by the powers that be, by popular society, it becomes an issue. It creates crisis. Okay? So this is one of the issues that we must appreciate, especially in the Western world today. And the Western world has a lot of crises surrounding cultural value, surrounding religion and all that. But the Western world emphasizes more of financial resources, okay, the economy. And this push and pull between these two values creates this very situation where there is a denial of the nebulous value of religion and spiritual phenomena, and yet an effort to tap from that value, and this creates a lot of crisis. Okay, so we've looked at this, and this is a very important one. We've talked at that, very, very important. This is one of the reasons why sometimes you find that politicians do not put money into something, of course, that does not bring any profit back. Since it is nebulous, it will not bring profit back. The profit you get is in the peace, in people being willing to do work, and that is why Marx considered religion to be the opiate of the people, because it made people more ready to submit to government. Okay, so that is what you get, but it is not what politicians often want. Politicians want something that will bring the money now, that will give them popularity right now. And this is the thing that we must understand, and we must be able to, now it takes a conscious effort to go and to design policy in a way that it affects such non-real sectors, okay, and provides for such non-real sectors. Of course, many will go and talk about civil education. Of course, many will talk about, compulsory basic education, of course, which is always suffering, even though it is being talked about. Yes, those are values, okay? Many want to run away from religion because they feel that religion is too contentious. but it is easier said than done. Okay, the people draw their psychological balance and psychological stability a lot from religion. Okay, so this is the issue that we must understand. Okay, the other point here is the desire for parity, and yet the complicated nature of achieving such parity. Okay, we've talked about this in previous episodes, but we know that sometimes, especially in the socialist economies, where people want to have some sort of parity, okay? They don't like the situation where there are a few people who are rich and others are poor. They want everybody to be at the same level. Of course, we know that this is very unrealistic in the true nature of life itself, but this is an increasing trend, an increasing desire. Since the advent of communism, socialism, we know that even communism, there is no such thing. There's no such thing as perfect parity. Okay, so this is what is happening. Okay, the desire for parity and the complicated nature of achieving such parity creates this tendency of government and politicians not to allocate resources in certain areas, because of course their point is amplified. The politician is strengthened when there is this unfair comparison or unfair or unrealistic desire among the people. I've noticed that the politicians are strengthened and they get more power to do what they shouldn't do. It is happening today in the world today in many countries because of the failure of socialist governments and socialist movements within capitalist societies. You find that the capitalists come back with a new vigor, and they begin to become too powerful. Yes, and this is what is happening, okay? And because when you allude to a fallacy, of course, you give your opponent more strength, okay? This is just the thing, it's a philosophical paradox, okay? When you allude to a fallacy, you base your argument on a fallacy, you give your opponent strength. It's just simple. So this is what happens, okay? Another point is tribal and sectoral and personal differences and agendas. Of course, like we said in the first point, that human nature is not purely benevolent, and that creates these tribal, sectoral, and personal differences, and of course, these agendas clash. And of course, when politicians come to power, they want to deny, even if there is a need in a sector, there is a need in a real sector, a legitimate need, they want to deny it because it has come across purposes with their own tribal, sectoral, personal differences and agendas. Okay? So another point before we will round up is international politics and dependencies. We're not yet rounding up. We still have a few points, but we are almost there. Okay, international politics and dependencies. Following the denial of the nebulous value of specific human beings within society, and some of this denial is due to racial and class nepotism. Of course, this nepotism creates a desire to suppress, voices and needs. And when these international politics comes in the suppression of minorities or majorities, as it were, due to racial and class nepotism, of course, you will find that such funds will not be appropriated, no matter how important they seem to be. Okay, and we've seen it happen very frequently. I myself have experienced this, and there's so much pressure that this needs to be done, this needs to be done, and every day it's on the table. This needs to be done, but it's never done because the nebulous quality of that resource, it just creates that situation where nobody wants to put money in there because there is no real profit to be made, immediate profit to be made. And of course, there's that push and pull. And that opens the door for the international politics to begin. And stronger powers, more dominant powers begin to flex their muscles because they are looking for this nebulous quality, nebulous power that keeps them in power, and they want it for no cost. Okay, they want it for no cost because if they put their money there, they are forced to continue to do that, and of course they are forced to admit the quality of such a resource, and this is the problem. So we see that very well. So now, this that we've just talked about, situation where international powers begin to want to tap into these nebulous or these less real sectors without having to pay for them, creates a situation of underdeveloping the less developed. This is where the whole concept of Europe, of course, underdeveloping Africa, came from. Okay, being the more dominant powers, they had, they have already claimed an overarching dominance, or they have a claim, an overarching claim over this nebulous resource. Okay, so whatever comes from Africa, they claim it. They say this belongs to me, just because they can, just because they are powerful. So the more these nations remain underdeveloped, the more it serves them, because they, at no point can these nations be seen to now be the people contributing, any form of substance to the supposed superior economy. Okay, so this is the issue where underdeveloping a lesser developed economy comes from, and it's very important. When we know this, we will now shift the ethical balance. That it's not just about the resources one has in hand, but it is the capacity to deliver such resources. And when you give a human being, importance just for being a human being, you put him at par with the other person. But it is very difficult to do this in an economy where physical resources and physical and know-how in distributing these resources is more important. Okay. Now, having said this, I am not going to take the side that says, that parity must be created. No. It is important to have the resources and to be able to, and even more important, to be able to manage these resources. Very important. Very important. You cannot give somebody who cannot manage a resource to manage it. He will destroy that resource. Okay? Very important. But you have to be able to empower such a person, even just to learn how to manage those resources. You have to empower him to learn to manage them, and to empower him to be independent in a way that he can allocate those resources and use them for his own benefit. Now, these are things that we must be able to differentiate and be able to clarify and be able to implement. Okay? So finally, we go to the old question, just like we stopped in the previous episode. Is humanity given more than it can handle? Having looked at all these things, looking at how difficult it is to really be an arbiter in the issues of policy development and implementation. Okay? We are forced to ask this question. Is humanity given more than it can handle? Okay? The very existence of religion, especially in Christianity, where we are expecting a non-human Messiah. Okay? Of course, Jesus was known to be 100% human, 100% God. Okay? As opposed to what the Jews are expecting, which is a human Messiah. Okay? This is the reason, that Christianity ends with this expectation. Okay? That a non-human Messiah must intervene. God himself must intervene. Finally, by returning to stop all wars, to stop all conflict, to now judge between people, and to be the the righteous one, who will not judge by what he sees, okay, but by the intents of the heart. Okay, so this is the issue. This is what Christianity propounds. Of course, I will not stop here like I normally do. Before he comes, what do we do? That is the main question. Even for Christians, the question is still there. Before he comes, what do we do? And of course, this is a question that we must continuously ask. And it takes people of vision, people that are leaders, to lead the way by doing what he would do. There's this question we ask a Christian: what would Jesus do? Okay, it has been a question. But of course, without those people of strength, people of character, who through his spirit enact practical principles, go into the fight like he did, okay, and save the situation, there is nothing we can do. There will always be people who will be deprived. There will always be people who will be neglected. There will always be sectors that will suffer, and that will always create conflict. I am David Dunjichinke for you today in Searching the Heart.
Long way back home. It's a dry and dusty path to where I belong. I hear you calling, my heart is breaking. I hear your voice, you're saying come home, come home. I hear the trumpets, my heart rejoicing. I hear your voice, you're saying come home, come home. I hear you calling, my heart is breaking.
Discover a transformative journey into the kingdom of heaven. Following the initial publication, the author dives deeper with two insightful follow-up books. Ever felt disconnected from God even in worship? Explore how God's unconventional ways can transform your life. How can you align with divine plans, avoiding distractions? Find answers in The Kingdom of Heaven on Earth and The 3, Illuminating Christian Truths and Prophetic Practices. Unlock profound insights guiding you toward a deeper connection with God. Don't miss out. Dive into this enlightening exploration today. Click the link on the caption to get your copy.